Hey everyone, so in this video we're going to look at how to place towers during gameplay, and the tower will automatically target an enemy when it gets within range, will automatically shoot at the enemy, and then we will look at how to eliminate the projectile and the enemy upon collision. A couple quick things before we start. If this looks a little bit different, it's because I shrunk it vertically. You can see that the Y scale is now just 0.4 rather than 1. And that's because since this was a deep trench, I was having an issue where the tower was pointing way too low. And something that exacerbated the matter is that the origin, the control point of the soldier is just underneath it. So that means the tower was actually shooting very, very low. So if the enemy is running away from the tower and the enemy is shooting very low, it would miss the enemy even if it was a slight distance away. So there's a couple ways you can handle it. The way I handled this was I lowered this, and then what I did is I'm going to modify the target. So it makes the code a little bit messier, but I'll show you what it would normally look like and then the modified version. So when you do that though, when you shrink this, you have to rebake it. So make sure that you click on clear and bake, and it created a few problems because this was so low. It means the enemy could run up here if they wanted to, or run across here. So I had to reduce the step height. I had to make sure that it could not step as high because it basically sees that as a step. Okay. So the height in which it could step I had to reduce, and the max slope I had to reduce. And the only reason why I knew about the max slope is because I got an error message, so I just reduced the slope until there's no longer an error message because there is no slope here. So it's just really the step you have to worry about. So I made those two modifications. Just want to let you know that. Depending on your environment that you're using, you might not even have to do that. Okay, so what did we do to make this happen? So this right here is going to be the tile, and you've seen me do this in other tutorials because it's very easy to use. It's almost foolproof. So this is just the plane that's been reduced to 1/10 of its original size. So it's just game object, 3D object, plane, and then you drag and drop it into here, and then that's where you start working on it. By drag and dropping it from the scene into the asset area, you turn it into a prefab. That way you can just instantiate this as many times as you want. So let's drill into it, and you'll see that its scale is just 0.1. Again, the reason for that is because these are made out of Unity unit blocks. So this is made out of exact blocks that are exactly 1 Unity unit, and a plane is 10 Unity units. Therefore, reducing it to 1/10, it makes the plane the size of 1 block. So it makes it very controllable where you want to place these. Like I know that this is 2 blocks wide. By changing the plane, that means I can make this 2 tiles. Okay, so let's go back here. So I shrunk it down to 0.1 on the X and Z. So as that people can't see this, eventually what we're going to do is we'll disable the mesh renderer. That way people don't see the grid unless they're pointing at it. Then we do want the grid to highlight. That way they know where they'll be placing the tower. Comes with a mesh collider. And so the only thing I really added is this tile con script. So let's take a look at this first. Again, you create a script just by right-clicking, create, and then C# script, and then you just drag and drop it onto the object. So not much here. Public transform and the brackets indicate that this is an array tower object. So this is going to look very familiar because this is similar to what we did with making the GM object aware of all the soldiers. You create an array, and then you're just going to put the soldiers here. Very similar. You're putting an array on the tile, and then you'll put all the tower objects there. So it's just rinse and repeat the same concept. This just isn't going to be based on time, though, unless you want a tower that fires on a certain timer. Different type of game, but in Orcs Must Die 3, there's a tower that drops barrels regardless of whether there's enemies. So maybe you could create a tower that fires on a certain amount of time. Your choice. Anyways, so the only other thing that we've got going on is on mouse down. So literally, if you click the mouse, left click, on the object that the script is attached to, which is the plane object, we will instantiate what? We're going to instantiate this. Because it's an array, you have to say which position it is. So far, there's only going to be one tower, so it's going to be the 0 position. So just tower object 0, transform.position. If you notice, we're not referencing the tower's position. We want the position of the tile. So we're going to say instantiate the tower wherever the tile is. But then we can use the tower's rotation. It doesn't matter because the tower will rotate during gameplay. I do want to point out that some of the towers in Rogue Tower do not rotate, like the particle cannon. Is it the particle cannon? I'm not certain. I know there's one that looks like a pyramid, and it just fires like this like laser beam. Okay, so that one doesn't rotate, but some of the other ones do. So we'll look at rotation in this one. So that's all the script does that is attached to the tile, and this is about all that's going to need to place a tower. So if you come back here, there's tower object. Okay. So you just have to add how many you want. So I already typed 1, and then it creates this position, and then you just drag and drop the turret. This is what we're using so far. You can use whatever you want. This is just something I purchased, and it's just a matter of just taking here and drag and dropping it there. So let's test that, because the other coding doesn't matter. So we'll take this, we'll put it into the scene, we'll just put it anywhere, it doesn't matter. We just want to test placement. So we'll run. There we go. I did have to scale this down in size because the default size of the tower was really big. I didn't bother showing you that because you're probably going to use a different tower and you might not have to do that. But do keep in mind, you may need to change the size of objects to get them to fit. All right, so we can delete that from the scene. Let me just take a quick double check. I don't think I missed anything else in that explanation because I wanted to do this ahead of time, or else this was going to be a very, very long video. Okay, looks like I already explained everything there. So now let's look at the turret, because the turret is going to be placed on the tile. So what does this do? So you might have to do this slightly differently depending on what you're using, but in my case, the top part is its own child object. So that's all that I want to rotate. So I just want the top part to rotate around. Now, the collider is going to be the range in which you want this to detect an enemy. So right now, by default, it's facing forwards. So that means something won't detect it unless it's coming up here, here, through here. So when you think about the path, this was defaulting forward. It was defaulting up, I should say. And so when it's next to a path, that means more than likely this is where it will be detected, at least on the right side of the screen. We might have to tweak this so as that it's detected. We might have to like pull this down here for when it's above a lane. So just keep in mind that this collider, this is the area in which the shot will be triggered. So there's no absolute right and wrong. It's whatever you want this tower to do. Okay, so again, we're just using a box collider. So it already comes with transform, comes with the mesh filter, comes with the mesh renderer. So here's the script that we're going to look at in a minute. Here's the box collider that I added. It's set as a trigger. We want enemies to pass through the area. We don't want it to work like a wall. For whatever reason, it requires a rigid body to rotate. I'm not sure why. We don't specifically call the rigid body, but this didn't want to work until I added a rigid body. So I'm just going to chalk that up to because it's Unity and move on. So we had to add a rigid body. Okay, so I've explained the box collider. I've explained the rigid body. Now we're going to look at the tower. So what I'm going to do, let me delete this for a moment because I don't want you to get intimidated, because that's not what it will normally look like. So public transform shot object. So that's making the tower aware of the projectile object. Private string shot cooldown is equal to no, but so this is going to be used as a timer. Well, or should I say this is going to let us know if the timer is counting down. Private void on trigger stay. So that's the thing. You have to determine how you want the tower to work? Do you want it to shoot at something as soon as it enters? Do you want it to be continuous? So that's why it matters. Are you doing on trigger enter or trigger exit? On trigger stay. So by using on trigger stay, as long as it's still within that collider, we're going to be tracking it. So on trigger stay, and we're looking for whatever the other is. So if other.tag is equal to enemy, so first of all, that means I added a tag. So I did that again off screen. And it's just a matter of adding a tag and then coming back and choosing it from the dropdown. I also added a box collider to this, so collisions will be detected. I don't think I did that in the previous video, but there shouldn't be any other changes to the soldier. So I added a box collider, it's a trigger, and I added the tag. Okay, so if other.tag is equal to enemy, get component transform dot look at, and then this would just be, I believe, other. And when I'm saying other, it is indeed referencing this. So look at the other object, and then you would just do other dot transform, and that would work. But it would shoot at basically to just under the enemy's feet, and you don't want that, because particularly when it is like I said, it creates two problems. The gun is pointing really low, which is, it just looks wrong because it looks like it's shooting into the dirt. And second of all, if the enemy is moving away rather than towards the tower, it's shooting too low and it will miss. So this is what it would normally look at. But unfortunately, this is what it has to look like. So all I'm doing, I'm still looking at a position, I'm just modifying the position. So rather than just saying use the position of the other object, now you're breaking it down into its 3 coordinates. So you're saying it's a new vector 3, other.transform, see, we were just using that, but now we're breaking out the x. We're not changing it, the x is fine. Comma, other.transform.position point dot y plus 0.55f. So this is the vertical adjustment. This is the adjustment that is making it point higher up and not pointing too low under the feet. And then other.transform.position.z. So it looks horrible, it looks messy, but all you've done is you've taken the other.transform, and rather than using the 3 default values, you've broken it down into its 3 values and you modified one. So my apologies that it looks ugly, but it really isn't that hard. It's just breaking that down into its 3 vectors. Okay, so that is making the tower look at the enemy. If shot cooldown is equal to no, which it defaults to, then instantiate shot object, transform.position. So again, we want to use the position of the tower because this script is attached to the tower. So you want the shot to be instantiated at the tower, and then you want to use the rotation of the tower because the tower is pointing at the enemy, and when we get to the shot control, it's going to say forward. So if it's using the tower's rotation, forward will therefore shoot at the enemy. Shot cooldown equals yes, which means until shot cooldown gets changed, this won't happen again. And then start coroutine shot timer. At the end of the video, I want to make a comment about IEnumerator. As always, Tech Dave came up with a great solution, but since I was already partway through this, I kind of don't want to go back. But at the end of the video, I want to give him a shout out for something that he pointed out, which I'll probably use going forward in other projects. And then here's the coroutine that you just called shot timer. So you'd return new, wait 4 seconds. This is how long you want it to wait between shots. So this is going to be a balance object. Like as I mentioned, Rogue Tower, you have the ability to upgrade the towers. So with each upgrade, you could reduce this by say 1/10 of a second. So the wait time between shots would be 3 seconds, then 2.9, 2.8, 2.7, 2.6, that kind of thing. So this is purely arbitrary, but this would be a great way to have an upgrade system. So rather than a constant, you would have a variable there instead. So after 3 seconds, shot cooldown is equal to no, which means that this can be true again. And that's really the most complex thing that is going on, is controlling the tower. And again, it's really not that complex. It's just that we have to, bust out the 3 coordinates and modify one so the gun isn't pointing into the ground. We'll save that. Okay, so we looked at the controlling of the tile, so you could click on the so you can click on it to instantiate a tower. We controlled the tower, which has now been instantiated. It'll look at the enemy that enters the trigger area. Now, keep in mind, depending how many enemies there are, you might see this jumping all around. Again, this is the first pass. This is meant to give you the basics. You'll probably have to do some fine tuning to keep the gun from doing crazy things. Now the control. So you're clicking on the tile to instantiate the tower. The tower is aiming at the enemy. It shoots. So now we need to control that shot. And all this is saying is get component rigid body velocity is equal to transform dot forward. And then whatever arbitrary speed you want to use, you're going to want to use a speed that gives you a high likelihood of hitting the enemy. If the shot moves too slow, you might be missing the enemy, and that's a bad player experience. The player could indeed complain that the game isn't balanced well if the shot can't even hit it. So this type of tower really should be like a sniper. So it's not a homing shot, but it should be able to get to the target quick enough. And if you just want to see that object, it is this. Here is the shot object. It's just a sphere. It's just game object, 3D object, sphere. Shrunk it down, very similar to what I did with the plane. You drag and drop it into the asset area. It's now a prefab, and it already comes with a sphere collider, so I just set that to a trigger. The other things it comes with as well. Here's the shot script that we just looked at, and there's the rigid body. Make sure to shut off gravity, unless you have a shot that specifically relies on gravity. For instance, if you're using a mortar tends to shoot up in the air and then come back down. In that case, you'd want to use gravity. That way the gravity handles the bringing down of the shot. So you'd give it its initial trajectory, and then gravity does the rest. But in this case, again, this is meant to be like a sniper shot. So let's add. So this is the script that's attached to this shot. So if other dot tag equals enemy, then destroy game object. So destroy the game object the script is attached to. The script is attached to the shot. Do I want? No, I want lowercase g. Sorry about that. That's one of the things that's challenging, is that there will be similar names that refer to something entirely different. So destroy game object. So just thinking through this. So this is the trigger enter. So if this has entered, if it has entered another collider zone and its enemy, then destroy this. Yeah. So we'd probably also want this to be destroyed based on time. Either that or your shot will just keep going. So in the start section, you could also do something like destroy game object, and then just give it an arbitrary timer. You know, how long do you want it to travel? This thing travels really fast, so maybe 0.5. Or else, if you don't say destroy, it will literally just keep going on forever. So I think that's about it. That's an awful lot. I don't think I forgot anything. Like I said, I tried to do all this prep ahead of time because I didn't want this to be a ridiculously long video. So now what we'll do, we'll test this, but then at this point, really, it's just a matter of placing these all over the environment. I think I'm going to wait into the next video to show you how to do the highlighting, because like I said, the next video is going to be basically just like a bunch of bells and whistles. So what will happen is that I'll show you how to do the highlight when you point at this, and then the highlight disappears when you're not pointing at this. All right, so moment of truth. Let's see if I messed anything up. So we'll click, it instantiates, he's running, he targets and he shoots. Targets, shoots. See how when he's running away, if I didn't change that setting, he would have shot too low and would miss him. And if you think the shot is too fast, you can reduce the shot time. Just keep in mind, this is really meant to hit the target. So even though it's not a guided missile or anything like that, it really should be hitting the target, or else it's a pretty useless tower. So do keep that in mind. And then the final step would be just to, so let's put this in the corner. Unfortunately, even though I talked about breaking this up into nice clean blocks, I didn't put this at a nice clean position, I don't think. Is it? Oh, let's see. Can we do 6? Okay, 6 is fine. Whoops. Actually, I think it will be just right. There we go. Yeah, I think that's fine. And so now it's just a matter of lining these up. So the only reason why you'd want to, well, I was going to say the only reason why you'd want to do this manually is that way you control exactly where it goes. Although for a coding point of view, I think it'd be difficult to do instantiation because this is not a regular, like a grid. So you probably have to just manually click these. So what we'll do now is we'll click both of these. And just for demonstrative purposes, we'll shut that off. So the player won't actually see the tower, and then you can just place it. That's the other thing I'll probably do in the next video, add resources. So if your tower, you have to make sure you have enough resources in order to even spawn the tower. In Rogue Tower, they use gold, whatever you want to use. Now what we'll do is we'll just do one more thing, and then that will be it for this video. And then I'll mention the call out to Tech Dave for what he contributed. So, okay, so it's gun tower, and say you want it to fire really slowly for whatever reason. Keep in mind the rate in which the enemy is spawning. We set that in a previous video. And actually, let me redo that because the collider is pointing forward, so it makes it hard to click forward. So again, that's some cleanup that we can do in the next video. So you can see it's tracking it, but it didn't shoot because it doesn't have, it was still on a timer. And I don't think the collider comes out enough to get this guy, which is good because that's part of the game balance. Okay, so pretty good. That is really the core elements of this type of tower defense. You've got the spawning of the enemy, traveling along a path. You have the ability to place towers. And like I said, I will do definitely one more video. We'll do the bells and whistles, how to make this glow when you point at it so they'll know where the placement is. We'll make an adjustment so as that the tower by default is pointing at the path. That way you don't have that dead zone like you saw where I couldn't click on it. We'll also do things like when you're destroying the enemy, you get gold, and gold is subtracted from the total whenever you try to place a tower. And I don't think we ever did the hit points on this. It just looked off for some reason. So I think that's it. Please leave any comments, any suggestions. Oh yeah, so Tech Dave, what he did is he pointed out a much better way of doing the spawning. So please check his comments because like I said, I'm not going to change this here because I've already partway through and I kind of just want to finish this up. But it's definitely cleaner and it's easier to control. And basically what it does is, well, you can see his comments, but basically it's a controlled it's a controlled repeating of a function. So you make a custom function and then it will control it. So it's actually much cleaner than this. And whereas this is predicated, you might want like an initial delay and then a separate delay. the statement that he shows actually takes that into consideration, takes into consideration the initial delay and then the delay between repeats. So it's actually quite effective. So maybe I'll do a tutorial about that at some point. But like I said, already fairly far through this, so I kind of just want to finish this up. Okay, so any questions, any comments, feel free to leave those. And I hope you found this interesting, and please do enjoy the rest of your day.